Okay, we'll get started. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. So my name's Claire Stevens. I'm the Early Careers Manager here at Baillie Gifford. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. Our session is called Application Process Uncovered, where we'll be talking about the Investment Research Programme. So through the course of this session, you'll obviously get to hear from our panel members. You'll get to hear about our application process, and you'll have the opportunity to ask us questions as well. So you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A little box. If you want to put any questions in there, we'll do our best to answer them as we go through the session. As you know, this session is being recorded and it will be online on our website within the next couple of weeks. But before we get further into the session, I'm going to get the panel to introduce themselves. So Rose, would you like to go first?
Hi everyone, my name is Rose. I'm an investment manager at Baillie Gifford. I have been working at the company for 10 years. I joined in the graduate training program in 2013. My background is in economics and finance.
Thank you, Rose. Brogan, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, I'm Brogan and I'm on the US equities team as a trainee investment manager. I joined the firm 2 years ago and my background is in biology.
Thanks, Brogan. Chris?
Hi everyone, my name's Chris. I co-manage our European equities portfolios and also our International Alpha Fund. I joined Baillie Gifford 11 years ago, also on the graduate training program. My background is in music.
Thanks, Chris. And Zara?
Hi everyone, I'm Zara. I sit on the UK equities desk at Baillie Gifford. I'm just entering my second year, so I started here in 2022. And my academic background is in social sciences.
Thank you. So before we go into the session, what I thought might be quite helpful is just to summarise what actually is our application process. For those who have been online, you will see, so we've got it clearly outlined on there, but I just thought it might be helpful to walk through that. And then what our panelists are going to do is answer some questions about each of the different steps in the process. So our application has 3 distinct steps. So number 1, you go onto our website, so Early Careers Baillie Gifford, and that's where you would then click on the link to apply. At the point when you apply, you need your CV, no cover letter, just 2-page maximum on your CV. And there is 2 application questions that you also answer at that point as well. Application questions have a word count, 300 to 400 words on them. At that point, you would then submit your application. Your application is then screened. Applications are screened by humans. I get asked this question a lot. We do not have any AI, so artificial intelligence in our process. Okay, so human beings actually sift the applications at that point. If your application was successful, what then would then happen is you would come forward for an interview. So it's what we call a round 1 interview. That takes place on Zoom, and it will take place between October, so the start of October, probably through to the end of the year. Those online interviews take 1 hour, and that would be with 1 investor, so 1 investment manager and 1 member of HR. So we'll go into that interview in a little bit of detail as we talk through the session. If you're then successful at that stage, what would happen is you would then move forward to a second round interview. The second round interview is in person, so you would come to our office in Edinburgh for the day, and there'd be multiple different sections in that day. So you would do an interview, you would do what we call a CV blind session. We'll cover that in slightly more detail later. You would meet some of our analysts, and then you would do an article-based discussion as well as part of that, and obviously have the opportunity at that point to see the office. Following that, you would either have offer or no offer, and that would be then your place on the programme to start in September 2024. So just a reminder for those who aren't aware, our applications are currently open. We do screen on a rolling basis, so that means that we review the applications as and when they come in, so that we can obviously book people in for interview as we get through the rest of the year. And the applications will close on Monday the 13th of November, so make sure that you've got your application in advance of that date. So I'm going to stop there. What we're going to do for the rest of the session is basically talk through the different aspects of it, hear from our panel who've all been through the process, and then open it up to some of your questions as well. So hopefully you can get as much as possible out of this session. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll start with the first question. So we're going right back to the start of the application process. So Brogan, if you think back to when you applied, what did you do to prepare your application for basically putting it in and getting it ready?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I did was I went on the company website, which sounds quite obvious, but try to cover as much information and read what the company was doing, what investments they were making, what were their values, what the culture was I could kind of get from that. And that's also to see if it was a sort of right fit for me as well. And then when I was sort of preparing the application, I thought about what motivates me, why am I thinking about applying into investing, what interests me about this role, and then really trying to sort of not think about too much, trying to create this application for them, but really thinking about my passions and what I wanted to convey. So again, it's just bringing your authentic self, and I think that's the sort of right way to do it.
Okay, thanks, Brogan. So Zara, moving on to the next part of the application. So at this point, you've obviously not submitted it yet. So there is 2 questions in there as part of the application. So how did you go about tackling them and thinking about what you might write for an answer?
Well, the thing about the 2 questions is that they're kind of broad enough to allow you to really just pick a topic of your choice to talk about. So I think I'd seen a few applications by that point, and I was kind of sick of trying to be interested in topics that really didn't make me curious and excited. But with these 2 questions, I could really just kind of put what first came to mind. And for me, that was trains. I'd just taken a trip to China and I was really excited about the infrastructure and kind of railway system there. So you can really, I think, just pick the 1 or 2 specialized topics that you can really kind of geek out over. And again, you might expect these kind of the things that you bring up in these 2 questions to come up in your interviews later on. So again, it's really good to just pick the kind of passion topics that you can talk about.
Okay, thank you both. So at this point, as Brogan and Zara just said, you have looked at your CV, you've looked at the application questions, and you've now submitted your application. So what happens next is your application would be screened. So Chris, this is a question for you. Like, what does a good application look like? What would make it stand out for you?
The frustrating answer to that is that there is no right answer. And I think what I would say is that there are a few things that I do look for, but I'm very open-minded as to, where people want to go with the questions and what people write on the CV. On the CV, I would say it's good to help us understand the other things that you've done outside of school and university. We want to get to know you, and that includes your interests and hobbies. We want to see that there's more to you than academic study. So tell us about that. On the questions, I would say I tend to think about a pyramid where you have at the bottom information, then you have analysis, then you have insight, and then right at the top you have wisdom. And I think whenever we're doing research, we're trying to kind of push ourselves up that pyramid as time goes on. So I think if your answers to the questions are stuck at the information level, that's probably not going to do very well. Whereas if you think about things and you really try to push yourself up towards analysis and insight, I think for wisdom, you probably need a bit more grey hair, but certainly really thinking about, an angle that you have that's different. And something that's not mainstream as well. And I think you can get a sense of what is mainstream and what isn't. Think about what we're expecting to read and perhaps what we're not expecting to read.
Thanks, Chris. Rose, is there anything you would like to add to what Chris has just said?
I think that covers a lot of the bases that I'm looking for in a good application as well. I think for me, it's important to be yourself and be authentic. And I'm also looking for someone with, some genuine interest in investing and businesses, whether that, is through your professional activities, or from hobbies, or just curious from your reading habits and so on, but something to convey that you are genuinely interested in this business.
Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, so let's assume that you put your application in. Your application is really good, it's made it past the screening stage, and you have now been invited forward to first round interview. So the next question we've got is, what do you do to prepare for that interview? So Zara, what would you say you done to prepare?
So I'd say, first off, because I was coming from quite an unrelated background, I was just looking up kind of the basic ABCs about the role. So just kind of, what are equities? How is it that any person off the street is able to kind of own a little bit of Tesla? And then I remember hearing that the interviewers would kind of want to probe into my decision making and my interests more than anything else. So I really wound the clock back and thought about why I was interested in the subjects that I was interested in at school, and how it is I kind of came to choose my degree program. And I also think as well, like kind of finding the crossover between your degree background or your experience and investing is an important thing to probe into, because there will be a lot there, and it's kind of I think it's up to you to kind of see what extra value your experiences and your degree can add to the job.
Thanks, Sarah. So Rose, from an assessor side, what advice would you give to a candidate when they're preparing for interview?
So I think maybe just linking to what Zara said, when you go to an interview, I guess, think about what is the context that the interviewers need to know to understand you and to understand the person that you have become today and your interests and so on. And that there might be things, important things that are not already in your application that you may want to highlight to, again, help the interviewers understand that context. So I would suggest, taking a step back and really trying to pull out what is the important element that I want to highlight to the interviewers. I guess, it's obvious that you should know your application well, and should do your homework research. I think that's like a table stake for any interview. But also think about what you want to get out of the interview as well. It's also an opportunity for you to assess whether this is the right workplace for you, whether these are the people you want to work with for a long time. So think about questions that you want to ask and what you want to get out of the interview for yourself. And just be relaxed and be yourself. Yeah.
Thanks, Rose. Is there anything you would add to that, Chris?
Yes, remember that the window for us to get a sense of who you are is actually very short. And so I think it's important that, as Rose says, you make it easy for us to see those qualities that you think we need to see. Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. We're really interested in how you think, and it's difficult to assess that if you spend your time just telling us lots of information. So we really like to get inside the thought process. And some parts of the second round interview in particular will be geared towards really trying to build some understanding of that. A couple of other things I would say: don't just tell us what you think we want to hear. We're a very diverse bunch, a very broad church. If you want to make money in stock markets, you need to have a very different view on any given company. So, we're more than happy to be challenged and to have a debate with you. And the final thing I would say is really think about whether investing might be for you. It doesn't have to be the case that you know for sure. I certainly didn't, and that's okay. But certainly getting a sense, particularly between the first and second round interview, of what investing is all about, why we do it the way we do it, the various other approaches that are out there, and why you think you might be suited to it. So those would be some of the things that I would highlight.
Thanks, Chris. Brogan, if you reflect back on your interview, is there anything that like surprised you about the first round in particular that you kind of weren't expecting?
Yeah, I think initially I was quite surprised in how in-depth the interviewers went into my CV and my background, and really asking me about the motivations behind why I chose to study a certain subject or why I chose this particular role. And as to sort of piggyback off Chris there, I think an important point is that it's only it's a short window for them to get to know you, and it's just really conveying why you made those choices. And we know that everyone's not going to have the same background, so kind of explaining how and why you made those choices is actually really valuable. And I think, yeah, what surprised me was just how two ways it was. They wanted to know what I thought about the company, what my questions were as well. So again, it was a really useful experience just to assess whether this was the right right path for me. So yeah, that was the sort of two things.
Thanks, Brogan. So Rose and Chris, you've maybe touched on this a little bit, but would you say that there's anything in particular, if there's one thing that makes a candidate stand out for you in that kind of first stage, is there anything in particular that you would say it was?
It's a difficult one. I think it sort of does depend somewhat on the other applications that you're up against. So there's an element of thinking about, you know, how you pitch the CV and the questions, and how, when you turn up for interviews, sometimes it's a case of how different are these people? Are they really, really different to what else I've seen across the cohort? So that can take so many different forms, and it's very difficult to be specific about that. And actually, you could have candidates that are fantastically curious and eccentric, but perhaps they're not as good at synthesizing information or whatever. So there are some qualities that might just be so good that we get impressed by that, even if some other areas are maybe not that good. We can work with that. I think a couple of other points that I would make would be people with unique experiences stand out. So I did music. We've got people here who were doctors. We've got someone who joined a few years back who was a sommelier. So I think people who've gone out, seen the world, lived, who have a broad range of experiences, that's valuable, and bringing that to the application process, I think that probably helps your chances quite a lot, I would say. And that's pretty much all I would say on that. But I think, to reiterate some of the points that Rose and I have already made, it's being authentic. We can smell artifice a mile away. Being thoughtful, being critical, and I think that's it from me.
Thanks. Anything you would add, Rose?
I was just going to say that there's really no one size fits all criteria that would make a candidate stand out. Someone may stand out for the right reasons, others may stand out for the wrong reasons. And I think sometimes the line between those can be quite blurred. Like, for example, the line between coming across as confident versus coming across as arrogant can be quite blurred sometimes. And so for me, I would want to come to an interview, or to see the application as open-minded as I can. And I think the same should go for the candidates. Be open-minded and try to don't try to be someone that you're not, because we can see that coming through through the different stages, and so the different interviewers can pick up on the different qualities and signals from the same candidate as well.
Thank you. Something that I've kind of been asked a lot this year as well is around ChatGPT. So we know that ChatGPT is out there, we know that students know how to use it, But just to touch on what Chris said there, like, do not use that to write an application answer, because there won't be the depth to it. And when you if you were successful in coming to interview, you would really struggle to like answer, and we kind of really start to probe you into it. Being your authentic self is so important in this process. So I just wanted to add that in there, because that has come up quite a lot with questions when we've been out at events. Okay, so let's assume that you have done really well and you have made it through the first round interview. So you're now on your way to the second round assessment day. So Sarah, you've obviously done this most recently. So what information did you get ahead of the day, and how did you actually prepare for it?
So right before, you'll get kind of an outline of the day and the different sessions and kind of when your breaks are, and that's really good just so that you can pace yourself for the whole day. I think a really valuable data point is just kind of questions that you were left with after the first interview. So for myself, I know that there were kind of points that I was pushed upon where I didn't really know the answer, and it was good to kind of research them myself and be able to kind of come back and loop back to those same conversation topics and follow up with them. And I do think that kind of that extra like development and learning is an important thing to show between the first and the second interview.
Perfect, thank you very much. So how do you think the second stage, Brogan, compared to the first stage?
Yeah, so the second stage interview, I guess, because it's broken into multiple parts, I guess the first one was focused on a bit of my background, but more about how I thought, I guess. So there was a bit more critical questions, a few more in-depth questions, and I guess that again tested my sort of my choices and what choices I made and why I made them, but also how I thought about investing a little bit more. So, and we delved into kind of the motivations on changing. So I came from a science background, so that was a big point of why I'd want to change into investing. I think for the other sections of the second round interview, I think preparation for that, but how it was different was it felt a bit more open and a little bit more unstructured, I guess. So it took different tangents for me. But that was my personal experience, but that was good because it led to very sort of exciting, very enjoyable conversations actually. So again, it's not too dissimilar from the first, but a few more tangents, a bit more differentiated thinking, and yeah, it's overall it was a great experience.
Thanks, Brogan. What about then? So obviously I mentioned one of those elements was the article-based discussion. So basically what happens here is you would have an hour slot. You go into a room, you're given a pack which has got multiple different articles from The Economist in it. And you have to pick one of them to then go into discussion about. So Chris and Rose, obviously having been in this session before, what, if any, advice do you think you could offer up to someone when they're thinking about preparing for this?
So in this article-based interview, what we are really interested in is hearing your opinions and having the opportunity to discuss topics that you have chosen in depth with you, but also be prepared to take the discussions wherever it may go. And sometimes the discussion may expand well beyond the topic of the article that the candidate has chosen, and it may go to different angles. And I think sometimes the candidate may be like surprised in terms of, oh, but this is not the topic, should we discuss this? So I would just say be open-minded, and again, follow the discussions, because the whole point is really to see how you perform in like a similar sort of stock-based discussions that we may have in the future if you were to come and work at the company, for example. And we want to see how you present yourselves, how you present your arguments, how you like perceive new information and how you deal with challenges, for example, and also how you challenge other people, like the interviewers, for example, if there are points that you disagree about, or if there are points that you want to debate about. And I think another point I want to say is just be prepared to say I don't know if there are questions or topics that are well beyond your knowledge or your circle of competence. It's better to say I don't know instead of just making up excuses or words. Yeah.
Anything you would add, Chris?
I think Rose has done a very good job there. Maybe one thing I would say is, back to my earlier point, we're trying to get a sense of how you think. And sometimes that's very difficult to do if you choose something that's really close to home, that you understand really well, where the knowledge differential between you and the interviewer is very, very substantial. So some interviewers might actually veer quite far away from that subject matter in order to try to get at your style of thinking. So don't be afraid to choose something that you don't know anything about. That's cool, and actually it might lead to a very interesting discussion that you might not have anticipated.
Thanks, Chris. So obviously one of the other sessions that I said that was in the assessment day is CV blind. Now hopefully from the name you would guess that means that the interviewer has not seen your CV. So all they get is your name, and that's done with intent. So that they don't know anything about you, and they ask a whole variety of different questions, but your background doesn't matter in that conversation. So Zara, obviously you went through that in your interview round. How did you find that experience, and is there any tips that you would give to a candidate?
To me, the blind interview session really didn't feel actually that different from the completely open-ended general interviews. And that's because the scenarios that the interviewer might come with are themselves actually very broad and open-ended and don't require any kind of specialized knowledge in that area. So again, I think even if you don't really have a clean answer to respond with, I think it's really helpful to just kind of just speak to the interviewer about all the kind of different tangents that your mind is going down, and maybe what you think about 3 potential options. And I don't think you have to worry about kind of responding with a clear, perfectly cut answer.
Sorry, thank you, Zara. So just a reminder, if you can remember to add any questions into the Q&A box, you can see we've got a number coming in there. We'll try and do our best to get through as many as we can. So the final question that I want to ask the panel is, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to a future candidate, so that can be for application first or second round, that you think would really help them in the process, what would that piece of advice be? Give you a second to consider it, and then we'll go to Brogan. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess one bit of advice for me was in the second round interviews. You have these blind interviews. You have this economist types of article based, but I think it's just to kind of relax and maybe don't over prepare for those things, and sort of be open-minded to what be different, different conversations. I think sometimes if you can over prepare and be too scripted, you don't come across as your actual self. And I think for me, it was just to relax, try and enjoy the process, and just bring my sort of true self to the table. So I guess that was main advice from me.
Thanks, Brogan. Rose, what advice would you give?
I would say really understand why you are here and why you are doing this process, because for you it's also a time investment and so on as well. So really understand why you are in this process, why you want to be an investor, and why Baillie Gifford could be the place for you.
Thanks, Rose. Chris?
I'd maybe just piggyback on that. I would say think about what you need from a career, and then think about what you need to find out when you meet us to figure out whether this might be a career that suits what you need. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Zara?
Mine was pretty much the same as that. Just try and note all the kind of quirks and the kind of avenues and routes that you go down with your interviewer that are different, and read something from that. Infer everything that you can about the firm, and think about whether the values that you learn about our company are important to you, and whether it's a place that you'd want to work at.
Thank you very much. Okay, so there's some questions in here that are really quick answers. I'm going to go through these and answer them first of all. So the first round interview is with one investment manager and one member of HR. So there'll be 2 people in that interview with you. We currently do not offer any like insight weeks or spring experiences for students who are in the first year. That's not something that we currently do. We only have the graduate programme. All of our opportunities are in Edinburgh, so that's our head office, and that's where all of our graduate programmes join. So that would answer that one that was in there as well. Okay, so back to the slightly longer questions. I think this one's probably been answered in some parts, but are you looking for a polished candidate, or are you looking for someone who's got potential? Oh, I can see Chris nodding away there, so I'm going to give Chris that question.
Well, I think we're looking for trajectories. I think if you've got a candidate that is clearly kind of getting better and better and better over time, that you know, that's intriguing. And I think also when we meet you, you know, so we'll have the CV, we'll have the first round, we'll have the second round. So there'll also be a chance to see a trajectory there as well as you know what you've written in the CV. So trajectories are interesting because it tells us whether, you know, you're likely to join and just keep doing that. And those candidates can be really quite interesting. So I would say we're not necessarily looking for a completely polished candidate, but we are looking for someone who is giving us signs that they're working hard to better themselves. They're learning as much as they can. Yeah. That's all I'd say on that, really.
Thank you very much. Another one that's probably fairly quick. So how do you assist international candidates who make it to second round? So if you are in an international location and you do wish to travel across to Edinburgh, then we will support you with that. So yeah, we do encourage that, but also as well, we appreciate that people have work and have lives, and that might not be possible. So we could do that on Zoom as well if that was a preference, but you would get the option to have both opportunities, and then it would be your choice to go from there. Okay, so another one about CVs. So would you recommend including a personal profile section on your CV? So let's take this from both sides. So Zara, did you have a personal profile on your CV?
I think at the very end, I had a couple of sentences about my hobbies and how much I like to bake. So I'm not sure if that counts as a personal profile section, but I did include one.
Okay. And then Rose, thinking about it when you're looking at a CV, do you think a personal profile is helpful, or does it make any difference?
I think if there are some very good reasons for why you want to put it out there, maybe to help the interviewers understand the context of who you are a bit better. Maybe there are some special reasons why you may have some big gaps in your education, or things that are not that easy to explain in a CV. So I would say that don't put it out there just because you want to be different. Put it out there if you have some very good reasons for why you want to include it as part of your CV.
Okay, perfect, thank you very much. An interesting question in here: is there anything that you would recommend that people don't say or mention at interview? What would maybe put you off? So Chris, that's a question for you.
Well, I think that's a difficult one. I would suggest, that it's an interview for a professional role, in a serious company, and I think you should treat it in that way. So, coming into an interview and effing and blinding, and wearing a vest top and that sort of thing is probably not going to be suitable for that environment. So put yourself in a situation, mentally in the situation where, you're in a serious situation, and think about the behaviors that you would expect from other people when you're in that sort of situation. As for subject matter, I mean, it depends on where the debate goes. I would suggest, you don't need to bare your soul and tell us all of your deepest, darkest thoughts and secrets. We're trying to get to know you, but we're not trying to get to know you so well that we know all of that. But equally, I think you need to give us a chance to get to know you. So we need to know enough about you to consider whether we'd be willing to sit next to you for a year, which, if we put someone through, if I put someone through, I might end up sitting next to them. So there's that dynamic in our minds as well. Could I sit next to this person for a year, maybe more?
Thanks, Chris. Zara, someone's got a follow-up question on something you said earlier on. So they say you said that the interviewers, they want to see the decision making, your decision making process in the first round interview. They've asked if you can expand a little bit more on what you meant by that.
So I'd say practically, like, the best way to show someone your decision making is kind of just to over explain. So rather than maybe sit on the side and be silent for 5 minutes while you kind of think of a more polished response, to just explain the kind of different routes you're going down, and even if an idea that you're playing with ends up not being the one, and maybe being a bit stupid, talking about why it's not fitting and why a different option might be better suited.
Thank you very much. I'm liking these personalised questions. So here's a question for Chris. What skills did you transfer from studying music into your job in Baillie Gifford?
Well, it's very difficult, to argue that my skills as a horn player had some direct relevance to my ability to analyze companies and manage money. So in a very literal sense, I would say there's not really very much overlap at all. But there are things that you do during the course of a degree, regardless of the subject, that are potentially skills and tools that you're honing that could be applied to a whole range of different things, and you maybe just don't realize it. So whether that's learning how to deal with a large amount of information quickly and figure out what someone's arguing, or figuring how to manage your time better and that sort of thing. So for example, there might be one or two things that I did bring across from being a musician. So some days I'd be practicing for maybe 8 or 9 hours. I would structure my day very, very carefully. 8 or 9 hours is probably about the length of a working day. So that has maybe kind of spilled over a bit. So I tend to be quite methodical in terms of how I split up my day, but I wouldn't make too much of it. Just it's more the tools that you develop when you're actually studying, when you're doing other things, whether it be, I don't know, doing ballet or bird watching or fishing or whatever. The things that you don't know you're developing that you actually are developing.
Thanks, Chris. Brogan, here's one for you. People are asking, like, a bit of a high level of what's the actual role that you're doing. So when you join as an analyst, can you give people a bit of an insight into that?
Yeah. So when you join as an analyst, you're actually, you're placed on in a particular investment team. So for me, I was on the long-term global growth team when I joined, and you are very much sort of thrown in at the deep end, which is really good. You have lots of responsibility and visibility from the start. So I guess my day-to-day role, I was first looking at researching a company. I was given that in sort of January to look at, and then I just delve into everything about that company that I could, whether, you know, from the financial reports and talking to the management team to interviewing past employees or anything like that. So you really delve into it, and then you'd write a research report then, and then present that to the team, and you would discuss that as a team then. So it's a really interesting sort of role. It's very dynamic with lots of elements in it, whether it's, you know, financial accounting to understanding a company's culture, which is also extremely important. So yeah, the role is extremely varied, and it's hard to say what a true day-to-day really is like.
Maybe if I could just add to that, I think certainly in your first couple of years, you just need to learn as much as you possibly can. And you will be sitting next to people who've been doing the job for far longer than you have. So you might be sat next to a partner who's been doing the job for 20, 25 years. You might be sat next to someone who's maybe been doing the job for 10 years, but is managing money and so on and so forth. So I think it's really important to take advantage of that and just to soak up as much as possible. And obviously, you know, as Brogan says, yes, you have to do research on companies and you have to present, but you're not doing that on your own. You're not necessarily just left to your own devices. You have a mentor, you have a buddy, you will have the ability to ask anyone around the desk, and you'll see if you get the chance to visit the office, it's very collegiate, very open plan, no barriers between us. So you'll get the chance to learn from people who've been doing the job for quite a long time.
Thank you both. So probably linked to that a little bit then, Rose, in terms of technical knowledge, what do we expect from a candidate?
You will be learning a lot when you arrive at the company, and there will be you know, the graduate training program that will be crafted to teach you all of the technical knowledge as well as skill sets that you need to learn to do the job well. So I would say that you don't need to have a lot of technical skill sets beforehand. We will be, you know, teaching you a lot of that on the job. And at Baillie Gifford, we don't, you know, require a lot of modeling or, you know, quantum model or, you know, quant finance and things like that. So there will not be an expectation that you need to know coding, for example. That's not the requirement. So I would say on the technical skill set, that's definitely something that anybody can learn when they join the company.
Perfect, thank you. One here for you, Brogan. Has your biology knowledge helped you in any way in your job?
Yeah, it's interesting. I probably didn't think I'd use a lot of the information from my degrees, but I guess it gives you a different lens to look at companies. So there's lots of mental models in biology, you know, whether that's sort of natural selection or fitness models that kind of really lend itself well to looking at sort of business ecosystems, or whether it's you know, you've used a particular device in your research and then you're looking at that company, so maybe you have a different view again. But to reiterate Chris, there's a lot of skills that you might not necessarily know you've honed in that time. So whether it's looking at large amounts of information and working out what the core of that argument is, but yeah, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on background, because you're learning things along the way that you don't know you truly are, and then you can bring them over to the role. But yeah, there's a few surprises along the way. Biology keeps cropping up now and then.
Thanks, Brogan. What advice would you give to somebody who is not successful in the process? So let's say that they've been rejected at application stage. Yeah, what advice? Chris, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, it's difficult because there's a whole bunch of possible reasons that might happen. And some people actually apply maybe a couple of years in a row. We've certainly had that before, and they've got through and got a job. So you know, if you are absolutely convinced that this is the job you want to do and a place you want to work, then I would suggest, you know, I think there is room for being persistent. Equally, if it's something that, you know, you've tried several times and, you know, you've been rejected, I mean, you can try to seek some feedback, which might help you figure out, you know, what's not working, which, you know, we might be able to provide. But you might want to have a think about whether this is really the sort of thing that for you, longer term. So yeah, there's only so much we can do to help. Sometimes I think it's a question of just having to move on and find something else.
Thanks, Chris. And there's also a follow-up question in here in that one then. So with regards to feedback, so we give feedback for candidates who come through to first round or second round. Given the number of applications we get, we don't give feedback back when we're at that CV sift stage. It's just not possible given the volume of applications we get. So yeah, but you can definitely get it once you kind of get to first round interview. There's a lot of questions in here about, do you need math skills? Do you need physics? Like what type of skill do you need? I think we've covered some of that, but Zara, having been here for a year, when you think about like maths or any technical skill you've used, what would you say on that?
I mean, when I look at kind of the more seasoned investors, it's just interesting to see the array. I think some people do like the modeling approach and opt to use it for pretty much every company they look at, and others kind of take a step back and then choose not to go into kind of that level of granularity. What I would say with maths, we do kind of use mathematical kind of principles every day without fail. So we will always talk about probabilities and kind of distributions and outliers and network effects. So I think a good grasp of those kind of more abstract topics is good, but again, that can come very easily kind of once you start the job and just with some wider reading.
Perfect, thank you very much. So what's the best approach to develop an investment mindset and critical thinking? I think that's quite a hard question. So does anyone get any advice on how you could develop that?
It's also reading and practice.
Okay.
That would be my advice. Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, what did you have on that one?
I was just going to say exposing yourself to as many different investment philosophies as possible. So if, you know, Baillie Gifford would describe itself as a growth investor, but the world of investment and the different strategies that people have is much wider than that, and whatever you can get your hands on, I think, is valuable.
I've got a bit of a follow-up, which is not a question, right? How realistic is that for people who don't come from a finance, economics type background? So obviously, Zara, you didn't come from that background either, neither did you, Brogan. So when you think about heading into the first round interview, how much of that did you do then versus in the job? So I think let's think about that from a candidate perspective. Is that realistic?
I think probably not for the first round, but there was for me, just from personal experience, there was quite a big gap between the first round and the second round. So I had time to read a book on investing, and it was a general, very accessible piece of work, just one that you could find in Waterstones. But I find that those kind of those general accessible texts normally do talk about a wider array of investing styles than just focusing in on growth. But again, it's not necessary.
Anything anyone else would like to add to that? No. That's fine. What's career progression like? So Rose, you're not on the programme anymore, so how what happened with career progression?
So the first 5 years would be with the graduate training program. I think, like Chris said, the first couple of years is for you to learn and soak up as much as you can, learning on the job, as well as from these tutorials that we provide as part of the training program. Then you will be in your and so throughout the first 3 years, I think the expectation is that you will rotate through various teams to give you the chance to be exposed to different investment strategies, investment styles, and so on. And the 4th and the 5th year, you will be based in one team. And this is a chance for you to develop more investment management skills. And again, learning from the portfolio managers and really stepping up from just looking at, say, an individual company to learning about how you can potentially manage a portfolio one day and manage money for clients. And after the 5 years of training, then it's really up to you in terms of how you progress and where you find yourself a more long-term home, which investment strategy suits your styles. And it really depends on the individual in terms of how quickly they can get to a stage where they can be a named portfolio manager of a strategy, for example. Some people may do that when they are in their 4th year. Some people may do that a bit later on. It's really, I would say, it's really a meritocratic based culture that we have at Baillie Gifford. If you don't want to become a portfolio manager, there's also a different path where you can be a senior analyst. In terms of the responsibility, there might be practical differences. However, in terms of the seniority and how valuable your inputs are to the team, is pretty similar. So I would say there are different paths. It's not that you have to be a portfolio manager to have your input being highly recorded and so on. If you don't want to become that, you can be more specialized and become a senior analyst. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Claire.
No, I think I think that covers it off really well, and we cover more of that as we go through. So yep, there's a couple. I'm really conscious of time, and I'm looking for one question that we could all answer at the end. So Zara, lots of people are asking, what's the book that you read? So
I do not remember.
okay.
I think anything by Benjamin Graham or Warren Buffett has written a lot of kind of essays, and Charlie Munger. So anything by those authors will, I think, be accessible, but also provide a good first step.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, lots of questions in here about what types of books people should be reading. Okay, let's see if we can find one for the last one that is good. Yeah, let's just finish on the book one, because there's a lot of questions in here on books. So any books that you would recommend, Brogan, if there was one you could recommend?
Yeah, I read a couple of investment books, I guess, before I started, and actually I really liked a book by Ben Horowitz, who's a sort of venture capital, actually. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and it's really a perspective for the founder running a company, and I guess the challenges that they face when you're trying to scale a business. And sometimes, I guess, if you're coming straight from a graduate degree where you haven't been part of a company, you haven't been part of a business, it kind of gives you that lens to think, oh, this is actually what's going on inside, behind the scenes, behind the financial reporting. So yeah, it's a really interesting perspective, and yeah, some colorful writing, but it's an interesting read.
Perfect. Rose, do you have anything you would recommend?
There are a lot of interesting books about investment and businesses that you can try and read, to get an idea about what investing is like, maybe before joining the firm, if you don't have any prior experiences with that. One of the books that was really good for me as in terms of like building a foundational knowledge was Uncommon Stocks and Uncommon Profits. Yeah. So if you have time, could have a look.
Obviously, you don't need to read all of these, and these are just suggestions. I don't know, Chris, is there anything that you would add in there? We've covered a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to read quite broadly, so I'm currently reading Destiny in the Desert by Jonathan Dimbleby, which is all about the Battle of El Alamein, and a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is written by a psychiatrist. So I think broad reading is a really good thing. In terms of investment books that I found quite good, there's a really good book by Richard Rummelt called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which I think would give you a really nice introduction to corporate strategy, but also strategy more broadly. And shareholder letters, I think, are really good. And I would suggest that there are letters by Terry Smith at Fundsmith, one of our competitors, I suppose. He writes very well, very entertaining. Warren Buffett's letters can be a little dense and probably not great for introducing yourself to the subject, but Bill Miller wrote some great shareholder letters. And there are plenty of others.
Lots of books out there.
And I'd reiterate Charlie Munger. Zara said Charlie Munger. Read Charlie Munger. He's just brilliant.
I find it interesting how you've all got different recommendations. So there you go. Just goes to show you there's lots of books out there on this topic. So if we can do this super quickly, because there's a couple of people that have asked this, what made you choose a career in investing? So Zara, will we go to you first of all?
I think for me, so my particular interest at uni was kind of in psychology, and I really like just looking at kind of the psychology of markets and how the entirety of kind of stock investing to me just fall under a very hard social science.
Thank you, Rose.
I think probably there are two aspects, like what made me choose and what made me stay in the career of investing. I think what made me choose, so to be honest, I didn't know a lot about investing before joining the firm, and I didn't have prior experience in investing either. So I really came to the process with very open mind, and I would say that probably I chose Baillie Gifford, and investing became part of that. And then what made me stay in investing was the learning aspect. I love learning about new businesses, new mental models, new technologies, new markets all the time. And I think that is one of the most exciting and fun parts of the job. So I would say that that's what made me stay. Yeah.
Thanks, Rose. Chris?
I have a very similar answer in the sense that I think I sort of had an idea of what I needed out of a career. I needed intellectual stimulation, variety, chances to go see the world. And this sounded like it was roughly a good fit. But like Rose, I don't think I really knew that was something I wanted to do for the long term until maybe 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years in. And now I love it.
Thanks, Chris. Brogan?
Yeah, I came from a sort of academic background where everything got very narrow and my sort of learning universe shrunk and got more focused, and I kind of wanted to broaden that out. So one of the main reasons why I kind of thought career investing would be good is just it's that continuous learning. And as to sort of reiterate what Rose says, you might be looking at one industry like semiconductors for 6 weeks and then looking at I don't know, the consumer packaged goods or something completely different the next one. So it's learning about these things and, you know, and having that variety, but also being exposed to things that you wouldn't necessarily look for usually. So, you know, something can fall on your desk which you've never looked at before. And that's very exciting. And yeah, that's the main reason why I sort of applied.
Fabulous. Thank you, everybody, for covering that off. So just to wrap up the session, thank everyone for joining. Thank you for our panelists for answering all of the questions. This webinar will be online probably within the next kind of 7 to 10 days. So if you want to watch it back, you can do that on there. There will be a short survey that will come after this, so we can just get feedback for future events. And a final reminder, other events are listed on our website. Should you want to sign up for them, go on there and do that. And applications close on the 13th of November. Thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon.